Well, considering where things end for these characters, I guess you can say things really weren't going so Gucci for them. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. Today we're talking about a film I'm a little late to discuss, House of Gucci. Before we begin, let me know in the comments what your thoughts on this movie were, if you already saw it, or if you were planning on seeing it, and make sure to hit that thumbs up button if you like these reviews, as it helps me out immensely by getting my content out there. And if you're new here, I hope you consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with more movie-related content on a near-daily basis. But let's not waste any more time and let's talk about House of Gucci. This stars Lady Gaga as Patrizia Reggiani, outsider from humble beginnings. When she marries into the Gucci family, her unbridled ambition begins to unravel their legacy and triggers a reckless spiral of betrayal, decadence, revenge, and ultimately, murder. This was Ridley Scott's second film of 2021 after The Last Duel, and going into the year, this was by far the film that was talked about more between the two for its potential Oscar chances. Like the way it was plastered all over articles predicting award season, it was pretty high up there on people's most anticipated movies of the year list, as well as high up there on Oscar contender lists. And while it looks to be the case for Lady Gaga, and I wouldn't count the movie as a whole out there yet, it does seem to have been a mixed bag in general. It's actually funny that, despite The Last Duel being a box office bomb and focusing on some controversial subject matter, that's actually received much better critical and audience reception overall. Meanwhile, even though I wouldn't call the critical reception for this bad, critics weren't quite as keen on it, with a lot of criticism being directed towards its mixing of tones, and I can understand where people are coming from when voicing their concerns, because this was certainly not the movie I was expecting going in. Knowing Ridley Scott typically gravitates towards gritty, epic dramas that still feel emotionally compelling, I thought this was going to be just another film in that vein, filled with a number of solid performances, and to a degree, some of that's true. I will say the acting here is great all around. Lady Gaga, in her first film since A Star Is Born, once again gives an electrifying performance. We see right from the get-go just how assertive Patrizia is, to the point that she'll do whatever it takes to get what she wants. And Gaga exudes such a fierce energy that's cranked up to an 11, and it makes her mesmerizing to watch, even if she doesn't always have our sympathies, because she's certainly manipulative in the way she essentially forces her husband Maurizio, played by Adam Driver, to take more of an active role in his family's company when he initially had no interest in it. And we see how her influence over him brings about a number of tensions between both them, as well as with the rest of his family. Now, Driver, on the other hand, is much more subdued as Maurizio, especially than we're used to seeing him, but that doesn't mean he isn't able to make the most out of it, once again turning in an exceptional performance as this tragic figure. And while this isn't completely presented through his point of view, leaving him at times with only so much to work with, he gives us someone who's considerably more sympathetic as a way to balance out having to follow around the more manipulative Patrizia. And the fact that Driver can really take such a timid, restrained role that only gets to do so much and still give us something that's a little more emotionally compelling than it was written just shows how powerful of an actor he is. And honestly, I'd even go so far to say that he's one of the finest actors working today. You also have Jeremy Irons as Maurizio's sick father, Rodolfo, who turns in a bit more of a stoic performance, but is thoroughly enjoyable with what he's able to work with. I thought the scenes of him consulting Maurizio were pretty solid and added some emotional weight early on in the film. So while this does tackle some serious subject matter, Scott chooses to give the film a campier edge as well, which is what people ultimately find jarring about it. The film will switch back and forth between taking itself so seriously and then suddenly choosing to go for this over-the-top feel and having a lot of flair. Now, I try not to make points too much regarding how actors speak, but here, that's a big part of this film's more ridiculous side. With all the main players being Italian, the actors all portray them using some of the most cartoonish sounding accents going. Like, when you think of the silly, over-the-top ways in which Italians are portrayed for, say, parody, that's actually how they're all portrayed here. Yet, they're in a serious story with a number of the actors really going all in during moments that require them to be a bit more emotional. The two in particular we see this the most from are Al Pacino as Maurizio's uncle Aldo, who basically gets to do what he's best at, where he rants and raves and makes all these silly noises, though this time he gets to do that just with a fake over-the-top accent, and he's fun. It's not hard to enjoy Al Pacino doing his thing, so I really had no issue with him. And then there's Jared Leto as Maurizio's cousin Paolo, who goes for what's easily the hammiest performance in the entire movie underneath some really thick makeup. And I mean, you're either going to have a blast with what he does here, or you're going to be annoyed by him. Now, I don't think Jared Leto's a bad actor. I do appreciate that he at least swings for the fences, even if there are a number of times where it doesn't work. And here, I'd say what he does is fun. He basically plays Paolo as a giant cartoon character, and it got a number of laughs out of me. But the fact you have these really hammy performances and moments in a fairly serious story does speak to what prevents this film from being great. The film tries to shift back and forth between something heavy, like the breakdown in the family's relationship, to then something like characters proclaiming something ridiculous in these silly voices. And it's never quite consistent with the tone it's going for. Now, when it's serious, it works, and when it's campy, it's pretty funny. But there are times it tries to have it both ways, and the shifts will be so jarring where you might be engrossed in this moment, and then someone will say this line that's meant to be emotional, and because of how silly they sound, it's hard to take it seriously. I think this need to fully commit to either being completely campy or being completely serious, and honestly I prefer the former, and it would have really gone a long way. Also, one other thing in terms of complaints, the writing on this was just fine. I'd say once you get past the performances, it's really nothing more than a typical rags to riches biographical drama that has to fit in years worth of storytelling in 2.5 hours. It's a bit bloated in some instances, and it can sometimes feel a little too exposition heavy with a lot of the backstabbing and financial jargon that gets thrown our way. I mean, it's not terrible writing, it's not flat out boring or anything, but it doesn't otherwise do anything that we haven't seen before. Even if you didn't know anything about this story previously and went into it totally blind, you can kind of see where it's going structurally. But what I will say is, at least a lot of its other elements make up for it. It's the performances that are this film's strongest suits, or its weakest points, depending on how you look at it, and it's the electrifying energy and in some cases hammy performances that ultimately carry most of this. Going hand in hand with that is Scott's direction, as he gives us a lot of visual flair and flashy imagery that helps add to the larger-than-life feel. I'll actually commend Scott and the actors, as they manage to do a lot that makes up for the so-so writing. And while the result can be a bit uneven at times, it's at least so upfront and in your face that you'll at least be able to forgive some of the more glaring faults of the writing at times. House of Gucci isn't one of Ridley Scott's strongest works, but it's a pretty solid time overall, even if it can be a bit uneven. While it suffers from several tonal inconsistencies and some generic writing, it's made up for heavily by its performances and its direction. It's given a lot of larger-than-life energy that's especially anchored by some wonderfully over-the-top performances, which gives it a considerable boost and helps make up for some of its issues. It might not be for everyone, but I had a good enough time with it, despite not loving it. House of Gucci gets a 7 out of 10. So let me know, did you see House of Gucci, or are you planning to see it, and what were your thoughts? Did you like the tone it went for? Did you like it more than The Last Duel? Let me know in the comments below so we can discuss. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and share it, and for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching everyone, and keep having fun with film.